All right, 1 minute. City is planning on one taking minutes.
Maybe you have the official time.
30 seconds. Good evening, everyone. I'm calling the May 18th, 2023 Credit River Planning Commission meeting to order. Would everyone please rise for the pledge of allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. Thank you, everyone. All commission members have received a copy of tonight's agenda. The agenda for this evening includes 2 items on the consent agenda, 3 public hearings, 1 for Northern Natural Gas conditional use permit application, 1 for an ordinance amendment for the election of planning commission officers, and 1 for a variance application and preliminary plat application for Ince Orchards. Finally, under general business, we have an industrial park concept plan that John Mesenbrink is going to present to the planning commission. Does anyone want to add or amend anything on tonight's agenda? Hearing none, can I get a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
Approved.
I have a motion from Commissioner Thane. Do I have a second? And a second from Hal. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries 4-0. All right, let's move to the consent agenda. Those items on the planning commission consent agenda, which are considered routine or non-controversial, are included on the consent agenda. Unless a planning commission member specifically requests that an item on the consent agenda be removed and considered separately, items on the consent agenda are considered under one motion, second, and vote. Any item removed from the consent agenda shall be placed at the end of general business. We have 2 items for tonight's consent agenda. One is the meeting minutes from March 2023 from the Planning Commission orientation meeting. And then we also have minutes from the April 13th Planning Commission meeting. I did note that there was a couple of typos to consider fixing on the Planning Commission orientation meeting minutes. I would like to go ahead and pull those and put those at the end of general business. Are there any objections?
Nope.
I did not see any corrections to the meeting minutes for the April 13th meeting. With that amendment, can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll make that motion.
Commissioner Wolf, any second?
I'll second that.
All right. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carried. All right. Next on tonight's agenda are 3 public hearings. The first one relates to a conditional use permit application from Northern Natural Gas. Commission members have received the staff memo dated May 7th, 2023, and NNG's conditional use permit plans. Before I open the public hearing, I'd like City Planner Nash to summarize the conditional use permit application.
Thank you. This is a relatively simple above ground valve setting that will be placed on Bill Coleman's property on the east side of Vernon Avenue. A drawing of what, thank you. A drawing of what that will look like is on the screen and included in your packets. It occupies a relatively small area, would consist of a gravel square area as well. And there's an existing driveway going to the silos that are nearby, and then they would continue a driveway from that area over to here, so there would not be another entrance onto Vernon Avenue. We're recommending approval with the conditions that are in the packet.
All right, thank you so much, Cindy. Would a representative from Northern Natural Gas like to address the planning commission before I open up the public hearing?
Madam Chair, we don't have any additional comments.
Could you please step forward and turn on the microphone for us?
Stephen Martinez with Northern Natural Gas, 1120
Center Point Drive, Suite 400, Mendota Heights, Minnesota, 55120. Madam Chair, we have no additional comments from Cindy's explanation.
Okay, thank you very much. I will now open the public hearing related to Northern Natural Gas conditional use permit. This is a time for residents to provide comments pertaining to this application. Cindy, did we receive any written comments from residents?
We did not.
Okay. Is there anyone here who would wish to speak on this particular conditional use permit? Is there anyone for public comment on this particular item? All right, seeing no public comment, I will close the public hearing on tonight's item. Members of the commission, are there any questions that you have this evening?
I do not.
Seems pretty straightforward.
No, I noticed that there was no in the drawings as far as green, to kind of screen it. Something I noted when I drive around different areas, I do see sometimes the use of an evergreen, either a shrub 5-6 feet tall, something to screen it. So it's just not this valve assembly sitting off the road.
And you could certainly, if you would like to see some screening, you could require them to, as a condition, provide a screening plan that would be approved.
Mhm. I don't know, I think it just for the way it looks within the city, I think it'd be appropriate to ask that be done.
If you want to do that, could you specify whether you would just want that along Vernon Avenue and maybe wrapping the corners just a little bit, or if you would want it around the whole site? The site is vacant to the east of that, so I don't know that it's necessarily needed around the back.
It's frontage to the road, just to screen it from the road.
Cindy, did I understand there would also be a rail that would be put in place?
Correct, they have a guardrail that they would be installing. As part of this as well.
Can you explain the function of the guardrail?
Mr.
Martinez?
Yeah,
So the guardrail is designed to protect the infrastructure within Northern standards.
Standard precaution, thinking about it from the standpoint of being along a busy road.
Given this location, it being the grade for the road is lower than the actual valve setting in which will be placed.
Got it.
The valve setting would be protected by the guardrail.
Thank you.
It's one of our standard items to install as part of it near a road.
Thank you. I appreciate the explanation.
Yes, Madam Chair.
All right. Are there any other thoughts or comments from members of the planning commission?
Madam Chair, could I respond to the request for vegetation?
Yes,
We would not be able to supply vegetation on the frontage of this, as the frontage of this would be the city right of way. We would not be able to move the site back from it. It's not part of our current FERC filed project. So we wouldn't be able to shift the location. So if the city did require any type of screening that would be in the front, it would require some sort of variance for us to place the vegetation in the city's right of way.
Cindy, do you see that as being a problem?
well, it's actually not city right away, it's county right away there.
Okay,
okay.
So it would have to be something that the county would approve, and I would anticipate that they probably would not approve of that, is my guess. I could certainly call them and ask them, but
Are there situations where we have had vegetative screening planted in right of way?
so
Or are there reasons to not do it? Maybe that's the easier question.
there may be reasons to not do it, and I just hesitate to speak to that since it's the county road rather than a city road.
Understood.
And I'm not sure what standards they're applying to that, section of road, so.
Okay,
Cindy, if you'd make that phone call, I just think it'd be wise. The whole idea of just having, I understand the valve bodies, we've both seen them. But just have something screening from the road, so at least it's not as just with all, disrespect here, an eyesore, just a screen, a valve assembly just sitting on the side of the road. So if there could be some sort of greenery, but we'll see what the county says.
Mr. Wolf, we could also potentially provide slatting to the fence as an alternative.
Yeah, I think it's, I don't know which one's more obtrusive, I think at this point in time, let's see where the vegetation goes, I think.
Yeah, this valve setting isn't super tall,
Uh,
so here I can put that drawing back up if that would help. There's like one part of it that's taller than the rest, but overall, it's not a lot taller than the guardrail, I don't think.
Cindy, I believe that it would be about 10 feet above grade,
But just that one side, right?
just on the one side, and then the other side, we're going to be approximately
2.5,
3
3
feet.
feet.
Yeah, at maximum. Within that footprint. I would also like to point out, as part of this, we did submit, we are removing the valve setting that's on Huntington Way. And that valve setting is being transferred to this new location. Not particularly that setup, but we are taking one out as we extend the line. This could potentially be extended in the future to another location. As these move, the need for these also change. So this could be temporary in nature while it's intended to be permanent currently. It could be a temporary fixture to the location as well.
All right. County Commission members, do you have any other comments? Commissioner Wolf, would you still like to include the provisions?
Yeah, I think so. I just think just for, we don't know what's happening as if it becomes a permanent site and as development continues to push outward, I think it'd just be a nice nice way to soften that if we could. So if the county just has a huge objection to it, well, then it is what it is. But it'd still be worthwhile to have that phone call, I think.
Sure.
Okay.
So just for clarification and understanding, if the county objects to that, then that condition could be deleted from the conditional use permit, or would it require an amendment?
Well, so what I'm actually thinking is that as you're driving down the road towards a site, you'd have to be right on it to look at the part that is where he's speaking of, that it would have to be in the right of way. And maybe there's some opportunity to do something on those two sides, maybe not even super far back, but enough to just break it up a little bit.
We do not have
Enough right away there.
the right of way space for the facility, and it was not part of our filing for this. So we would have to seek approval from the landowner to take additional land in order to do that. If the landowner was unwilling to do that, I'm not sure that's an item we would be able to go through the process to get in order to meet those needs, because it's not something that would necessarily be a qualification for us, if that makes sense,
Sure.
to go through that process.
Let's see what you find out.
Sure.
All right. Any other comments from planning commission members? Any other questions? Okay. Seeing none, I'm going to ask for a motion to recommend to the city council to approve the application for the conditional use permit for the reasons we discussed here this evening, as well as those outlined in the staff memo, with the addition of vegetative screening. Is there a motion?
I'll make it a motion.
Commissioner Wolf has the motion. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Commissioner Tandy offered the second. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you,
Thank you
Madam
very
Chair,
much.
of the commission. Have a good night.
All right, our second public hearing this evening is for an amendment to the City of Credit River zoning ordinance that relates to the election of officers. Planning Commission members have received a staff memo dated May 7th, 2023, outlining the proposed amendment. The draft ordinance amending the City of Credit River zoning ordinance related to the election of officers. So this amendment is relatively straightforward. The existing ordinance provides for the election of officers in January, However, with the change to appointing new members from a January to a February timeframe, it is appropriate for the election of officers to now occur in March. The ordinance amendment reflects that change. Cindy, do you have anything else that you want to add or clarify to this particular?
Given it's a one-word amendment, I have nothing to add.
Okay, thank you very much. I will now open up the public hearing related to this proposed zoning ordinance amendment. This is again the time for our residents to provide their comments pertaining to this proposed amendment. Did we receive any written comments?
No.
All right, seeing no written comments on this item, are there any residents who would like to speak on this particular item?
Just one minor thing, potentially.
All right, could you please come up to the podium and state your name and address for the record, please?
Yeah, my name is Lucas Enns. The only thing I really have to say, would it make sense to instead to amend this to state that the election of officers will take place at the next regularly scheduled meeting after, like, you get appointed, rather than having to potentially change this every single time that like the council changes when you guys get appointed, just make it so it just the next regular scheduled meeting you guys get.
Following appointment.
Yeah, just that's my only comment. Thank you.
Are there any other comments? Are there any other comments on this particular issue? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. Are there any members of the planning commission who wish to make a comment? All right. Cindy, would you have any thoughts about the suggestion that was proposed?
It's certainly language you could use instead, and I don't. But I have had a situation where there was not enough interest in members being on the planning commission, where we haven't filled all the seats in other communities. I don't really think that's gonna be a problem in Credit River. But in the event that something like that was a problem, you know, then if you had a situation like that, then we're kind of never quite appointing.
So having a
Someone-
date may offer a little bit more concrete
Right.
impact in this instance.
Right, and we feel that the March meeting would be the latest that would ever occur,
Okay.
so, and I think the thought when this last election cycle occurred and then planning commission members had to be reappointed as well, was that since the city council member's office takes effect on January 1st, it gives that new council, whoever that is, the opportunity to select who any new planning commission seats are.
Mhm.
I appreciate the suggestion and also the clarification there for the choice of words. Is any member has anything else they wish to say about this specific issue?
I think for the reason that she talked about, you know, the latest being March 1st, especially with the new council coming in, giving them time for input. As you've said, I don't think we're gonna have a problem with interest, but yet now if it got, is it March 1st firm, or if all of a sudden they came in and nobody's getting off and they're gonna reappoint everybody in the same, it could go February 1st, or is it a March 1st date?
Well, so let's use that scenario.
Sure.
Whoever has been the chair and the vice chair will just continue through March, so. You know, they might all be sitting, it might be new sitting members, but you're probably going to have some that are still carryover.
Sure.
Okay. Anybody else wish to comment? Commissioner Wolf, anything else?
Nope.
All right. Hearing no other comments, questions, or concern by planning commission members, may I get a motion to recommend to the city council to approve the ordinance amending the city of Credit River zoning ordinance related to the election of officers?
I'll make that motion.
All right, I have a motion. Do I have a second? All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries 4-0. Our last public hearing for the evening is related to an application for variance, preliminary and final plat for Ince Orchards. Planning commission members have received a staff memo from City Planner Nash dated 5/8/23, a memo dated 5/8/23 from Scott County Environmental Services, regarding this project and conformance with the regulations of the Scott County Subsurface Sewage Water Treatment, Sewage Treatment System Ordinance, STS number 4, and Minnesota Rules, Chapter 7080. They have also received a preliminary plat for Inns Orchards and a final plat for Inns Orchards. Before I open up the public hearing, I'd like to have City Planner Nash please summarize the variance and preliminary plat applications that are before us.
Thank you, Chairman. So you've had a number of similar types of very small 1-lot or 2-lot subdivisions. And this is basically the same as the rest of those, in that it's land that has not been platted previously. It has a meets and bounds land description, and your ordinances require that in order for somebody to build a house on land, that it has to be a platted lot. The one wrinkle or difference to this one compared to the other ones that you've had in the past is that given how this piece of property sits and its size and the lack of any other roads anywhere nearby, it can't currently meet the requirement that access is from just a local road rather than from a county road. So hence they are asking for the variance as well to be able to access from the county road. The county has looked at that and they've recommended approval of an access to the county road. And so we are recommending approval of both that variance as well as the preliminary plat. Happy to answer any questions that you have.
All right, thank you, Cindy. Lucas or Sarah Ince or their representative, are you here tonight and do you wish to speak? Please come up to the podium. Good evening. Could you please state your name and address for the record?
My name is Lucas Ince. I currently live in Egan, but planning to live here soon. Other than what Sydney stated, no further comment.
Thank you very much. All right. I will now open public hearing related to the variance and preliminary plat application for Inns Orchards. This is the time for residents to provide comments pertaining to these applications. Cindy, did we receive any written comments from residents?
No, we did not.
All right. Are there any residents who are here tonight who wish to make public comment? Are there any residents here wishing to comment? All right, seeing none. With the and we have no questions, of course, from residents related to the application. I would like to close the public hearing. Are there, may I have a motion and second?
I'll make a motion.
And the motion to close from Commissioner Tandy. Do I have a second? Motion and second, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries 4-0. Do any other planning commission members have questions or comments related to this particular application?
I do not.
Cindy, would you say that the granting this variance would be more of a hardship issue as far as finding access to this lot?
It is in this case, yes.
Okay.
And then the only other thing I'd add is that we'd ask you to take separate motions on first the variance followed by the preliminary plat.
Mhm.
Got it. Okay. Any other commissioners wishing to ask questions or make comments? Okay. All right, I have, we had a motion to close the public hearing. May we get a motion first on the
Variance.
request for the variance?
Go ahead.
I'll make a motion.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
I have a motion and second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Motion carries 4-0. Next, going to ask for a motion to recommend to the city council to approve the preliminary plat application for Inns Orchards, subject to the conditions that were outlined in staff's memo of May 8th. Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion to approve.
I have a motion from Commissioner Tandy. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
I have a second from Commissioner Wolf. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries 4-0. All right. Cindy, that concludes the items on the public hearing list. Is that correct?
Correct.
All right. At this time, we'll move on to general business. As you'll remember, we have a second item, which is the correction to the meeting minutes from the planning commission's orientation session from May 2023. That will be added as 4-2. Finally, we've got the first order of business item, Mesenbrink commercial plan for general business. All the commission members have received the following documents related to this concept plan. There is the staff memo from City Planner Nash and City Engineer Nelson regarding the Mesenbrink Industrial Park concept plan that was dated May 8th, 2023. There is an aerial view of the area with Mesenbrink notes. On April 14th, 2023, a memo from Scott County Transportation Services to City Planner Nash containing comments on the concept plan, a schematic reflecting the Feldman through street, Feldman land survey dated June 17th, 2020, revised Feldman property sketch in color, and a Feldman property sketch. When we first have Mr. Mesenbrink and or his representatives approach the podium and present the proposed concept plan, before speaking, if you could state your name and affiliation with the plan, that would be appreciated. And then afterwards, we'll open up public hearing following comments by City Planner Nash. Welcome, Mr. Mesenbrink.
Hello, John Messenbrink, 7765 East 175th Street. I'm here tonight to present a new project. We've been working on it for a few months and supplying the city with documents that they're looking for to get a concept and an idea of what we want to do. We've went through a couple meetings with the county on the highway, and I had a little bit of a surprise when I read Cindy's memo from Craig on the road going to the south. There's some confusion there right now that they're looking at the possibility that may get access off 180th Street. We did not propose that. We proposed a full intersection off of County Road 21 for both the north and the south side. I don't think it's a stopping issue. It's something that's going to take another meeting to get resolved. It's a fairly simple plat. There's approximately 5 lots on each side. Those lot configurations could change in the weeks, months to come as this process moves forward. We have some issues. We have to decide what type of septic system is going to go in there, whether it's going to be an individual or a common septic. I think the city is open to look at either one. It doesn't really make any difference to us. Either one of those systems, when we're done, would be readily available to hook up to city sewer and water when it comes, which I don't know when it's going to come. I've lived in this township for 60 years and I don't think it's going to be in the real near future. We have to put in our own well. All our developments require sprinkled buildings. So we would run a 8-inch force main through all the street work and all the hydrants, everything would be in, just, you wouldn't know the difference from a city street. Everything would be in and done. And then we would run our sprinkler systems and all the potable water from that system. The same with the septic, depending upon if we're going to pump it or go gravity. And that's something that we'd have to work out with the engineers on both sides, the city and our side. But when we're done, we leave the development to the point where when services are going to come on one like this, and someday they will come, I don't know when, but it's an easy hookup. You don't tear any streets out. Everything is there. The buildings were already hooked up. The water at that time, it's up to the city what they want to do. They can either keep our well, close it, hook up, whatever, but the wells are big. They're no different than any well that the city would put in. We put the same style well in. They're monitored. Every one of the lot owners owns a portion of that well until such time that, city services would be available. I think the lot configuration. It's probably fairly close. We had two different configurations. This configuration shows the south property connecting now to 180th Street. The original drawing had, there it is right there. That was our original proposed drawing. We did change that to make a connection to 180th Street. There's no viable connections to the north at this time. There are just no streets up there. There's nothing to hook to. And this is where we propose to take the roads or easements for future. I mean, we don't know what's going to happen yet, but we'll be set when that time comes. We're actually providing how this development goes. We've been trying to put up a new office for some time. I've been in front of this board for that same reason. And this area up here will actually be our new headquarters. I'm not quite sure on the configuration of those lots yet, but like I said, we've worked through them. You know, there's a little bit of homework to do, and there always is. We've done a lot of these. None of them are simple. And I know there's a lot of neighbors here. Probably off 180th Street, maybe elsewhere, I'm not sure, but I think the best thing to do, the best example of what this park will look like is the park we've got in Prior Lake. I opened that park up in 2004. It's full, but we put up most of the buildings in there. That's the kind of clientele that we'll probably end up with right here. We build our own buildings, we don't sell the lots. If it doesn't match what we want, we won't sell the lot to that customer. So we have pretty good control over the type of people that goes into our developments. We're the dealer for Nucor, and we also put up precast. It just depends on what the customer wants at the time. Our building will be a Nucor building. And I just can't tell you what the rest is. I mean, if I could see into the future, I'd do it, but there's just no way. I mean, there's a lot of guesswork in this. It costs a lot of money to get a development like this ready. But we would like to build our offices in there, and that would get the ball rolling. And from there, we hope we can sell some of the lots and put some new buildings up to get the park going. So I don't know if you've got any questions. I'd be more than happy to answer them if I can.
Yeah, I'm sure we will. At this point, Cindy, can you walk us through this concept plan? Can you also help us understand, you know, at what stage we're at and what the purpose of a concept plan review is versus other parts of the process, considering land use?
Sure. So first off, a concept plan review is it's literally that, it's a concept plan. We don't have very much information about the project at this time. It's a very preliminary layout so that it can generate some conversation and provide some guidance to a proposed developer in how, you know, what they might need to look forward to as they seek to proceed with obtaining, you know, applying, making an application for a project and then getting a decision on that project. So this is the very first step. It's an optional step, and it's also non-binding. So any comments that are made, you know, there may certainly be additional comments made later. This is not an approval. And the next steps along the way on this project in particular would be, most of them are outlined in the staff memo that we put together. So I'll kind of walk through that if that's okay.
Yes, please.
So one of the very first things is that this property is guided on our future land use map as urban expansion reserve, and that district provides opportunities for future development when municipal water and sewer services are available. In our comprehensive plan, it's a little different than a lot of people's plans because we actually have a build out map as well. Showing that once those services are available, at least at the time that we prepared the comprehensive plan, what did we envision might be in an area? So on this property on the south side of 21, it was envisioned to be commercial uses, and that would be more your convenience stores, retail, service businesses, things like that is what your typical commercial is. But it could be anything that's listed as commercial in table 20-4 on the zoning ordinance. On the north side, it was the part closest to 21 is guided as commercial, but the part further to the north is guided as medium density residential. And I think both of those, so the commercial would be similar to the south side. The medium density residential would be more like it's about 8 units per acre or so. So probably more like a townhouse level of density of development. As we've discussed before, when you bring in the water and sewer later, we are required to balance your entire city out. Well, the part that's sewered at a minimum of 3 units per net acre. And of course, when we have some single family going in that's lower than 3, say coming in at 2 units per acre, you do need to balance that out with some higher density in some locations. So this was one of those locations that first comp plan that we did kind of envisioned that some of that could occur. To do the types of uses, that is my understanding of what needs to be done. This area would need to be re-envisioned as being industrial. So that would change that commercial to those types of industrial uses instead. There certainly would be an opportunity that Mr. Mesenbrink could come in with a mixed type of plan where some parts of it are commercial, some are industrial. And that might be something he might consider if he continues with an application for the project. The other concern, however, is that we have to take that medium density residential, and because we are now, we balance the city at the 3 units per acre, so I don't have any flexibility here anywhere in the city. So we would need to find some other location to make up that density that we're losing on somebody else's property. So the reimagining this area is probably a bigger task because it's what's being requested would be a large change from what we had been working on, but it also is going to affect road networks and again, land uses on other people's properties as well. So it's a fairly complicated comprehensive plan amendment that would be proposed. The next piece is that the zoning would also need to be changed to match. It's also urban expansion reserve right now. So it would likely need to be changed to predominantly probably industrial. Again, there might be some patches of commercial possible in here. So ultimately, one of the things that the city will need to consider is that in the future land use map, this was the main area that we had shown as commercial types of uses that would provide those types of service businesses that the residents would regularly utilize. So you'll need to consider if a comprehensive plan amendment is applied for, is it a suitable site to change to a different use? If you do that, what would you do for commercial in the future in some other location? Is there another location? Is there a better location? I can't answer any of that right now. I really do think it's a bigger discussion because this is a very important corridor and a pretty large change. Then I'm kind of skimming through I will say that we don't have any current projection on when municipal services will be available to the area. Mr. Mesenbrink has indicated that he could install water and sewer pipes in the ground so that they'd be ready for connection at whatever time that water and sewer would come to that area so that we would not have to rip up the roads again to install those. So that may address some of that issue. But that said, something that we develop now might not be the same as something we would develop later on water and sewer. So the density of what would be there and utilizing those services may not be as dense as something you would get later. It's my opinion that this site would require an environmental assessment worksheet, given the possible amount of square footage that could be constructed on the site, given constraints of zoning. I don't believe that they intend to actually construct that much at least initially. But with future additions to buildings or reuse of the site, it could certainly definitely end up being over that amount, even if their initial construction was under that. The, as Mr. Mesenbrink indicated, he did originally provide the concept plan that's shown that has the road on the south ending in a cul-de-sac. That is something that Scott County doesn't like to have happen coming off of a county road, but it also would be against our ordinances. So our ordinances do require that roads need to be stubbed through so that we have multiple connections to different areas for various reasons, public safety related, et cetera. So he did provide them this other sketch that I had up earlier that shows how that road could come down to 185th Street. And then I think that's the bulk of the comments. There's some other smaller comments that we had, but the key ones are related to comp planning and vision for the future of what the community would want this area to be. And then one other thing I'll add is that I did email out to all of you yesterday afternoon a copy of the several emails that we received with public comments on this proposal. They the ones received by that point in time were predominantly from folks that live on the south side of 21. And they were very related to concerns about traffic and safety on 185th, especially coming towards the Clear Lake Court Street. Concerns about aesthetics and visual, what are they going to be looking at? A lot of concerns about outdoor storage and screening, trucks, traffic, everything you would expect with a proposed development such as this. I have not had I've been in meetings pretty much since then. I have not had a chance to look through any other emails that I've received, but I do anticipate that I received some since then as well.
And there was a notice that went out to neighbors.
We mailed a notice out, and there was something as well on the city's website for a project page.
Thank you for that summary. I really appreciate it, Leonard Nash. Although it is not necessarily required at this stage, we have heard from the public and we will open up the opportunity for others to make comments. We would like to keep comments to 3 minutes. And we have heard specific things high level already mentioned. So if someone does have comments or questions that expand on that, we would welcome the public to step up to the podium and articulate their questions or concerns. Is there anyone here who wishes to make comments? You can go up to the podium and state your name.
Dave Martell.
Could you also give your address, please, for the record?
Sure, 17935 Texas Avenue. So I wasn't aware on the mailing you sent out, it did said no public comment.
We're not taking official public comment because it's not at the stage where we would do so, but we want to provide residents the opportunity if they have questions or concerns.
Okay, fair enough.
Where they can be heard.
No, I understand. Okay. So, I mean, I think a lot of us here are concerned just with, it's a big change, right? I don't think we're ignorant that it was going to stay appealed forever, but, kind of feel like there hasn't been any discussion yet. Maybe it's pending, but there's no discussion about turning it from what was appealed into very much not appealed, and what that would mean for the city, what it would mean for us as residents, and specifically what it would really mean for my family as a concern, obviously. So I just want to make sure, obviously it's early days here, but just want to make sure all things are considered. What's in the best interest of the city long term, what's in the best interest of residents. What can be done if it is approved to provide for the concerns that we have. So that's just kind of it. I just want to make sure that we're early and we're thinking this all through and we're not surprised. I want to make sure the city, even though they want to indicate a road going through, be real careful about that. You're going to have 1,000 cars cutting that corner. I'm not sure the city's really thinking that through. And furthermore, just making sure as our in my mind, there is a couple residences there. I happen to have a special interest in one. Would welcome other considerations for that corner of that piece in the southern parcel. So.
Could you maybe, are you the property that's sitting in the middle of this parcel?
I am the problem.
Just so we can,
Yes.
yes, so for everybody who is on the planning commission, this is a house.
Correct.
Sitting in the middle of this parcel. There's an access easement right now that goes out to Texas Avenue.
Correct. It's good. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who wishes to ask questions or offer comments at this time? Please come up to the podium and state your name and the address for the record, please.
My name is Matt Prettyman, and I represent the sellers, the Feldman family that owns the property. And I think it's all fine and well that I've read some of the emails, people concerns about it. Just want to ask the city to understand that the sellers has some rights too. And they've been trying to sell this property now for many, many, many years. And it's always one thing or another that's preventing them from selling it. The average age of the people that own this property are nearly 80. Okay, they would like to move on with their plans in life to sell the property. I think Mr. Mesenbrink's project here is the most formidable, reasonable approach that we've seen in all the many, many, many offers we've talked to people over 7 years. Legitimate guy, okay, legitimate offer. I do agree with the neighbors about the cut through road. I think that's a bad idea. You're just gonna put traffic on 180th, that's unnecessary, okay? But on the flip side of the coin is to ask a developer to pay to redevelop 180th and all the rest of them around it makes it cost prohibitive to sell this property. So we're just saying on behalf of the sellers to consider that we have property rights too. We would like to sell the property, and anybody in the room here that would like to buy it can certainly do that. And yet none of them have come forward and done that, except for this man right here. So I think it would be wise. Pardon me? Well, you could have done it. Anyone could have done it.
Let's just keep the
Comment.
comment to you alone, and if someone else wants to step up afterwards, they can.
I understand, Steve, but it's very frustrating. I'm speaking on behalf of elderly people.
Sure.
Quite a group of them. They cannot understand why. We've been approached by many, 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 many people to buy this property. And if it isn't one thing, it's another. It's no sewer and water. You can't access 21. You got to come 180th. You got to, I mean, my God, Cindy, you know, I'm no stranger to you. We've heard it all. At what point are we going to draw the line and say, this is the way it goes?
And I think to address that point, that's what this whole process is about.
Yeah, but we want the process to establish some results.
Sure.
Okay, kicking the can down the road. These people are not going to live to see the check they're going to cash. Okay, and that's terribly unfair for these people. Terribly unfair.
Okay.
And so for people to say, I don't want it to change because I like to look out my window and I like to this and that. Well, you don't own it. So we'd ask you to just buy it. If you got a better plan. Please don't cut me off here. I understand.
Your 3
I'm
minutes
just telling you,
expired.
let's come up with a comprehensive plan that makes it work for everyone in this room. Be happy about it. It's a good project for the city of Credit River.
Thank you for your comments, sir. Your time
Thanks
is
for
now.
shutting me up. Thank you.
Other comments that residents wish to make?
Hi, I'm Justin. I live at 18020 Clear Lake Court. So the very home southwest by lot 10. Simply, I'm not worried about a commission. I'd like to keep Credit River quiet, safe, and beautiful. That's it. I personally feel that this particular property could be better used as residential or commercial. It's right off the main road. I'd love to have a gas station right in the corner. But that's it. I just like to keep it pretty. Thanks.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who wishes to offer questions or comments?
I'll-
All right, please step up to the podium, state your name and address for the record, please.
Andy Chase, 18178 Cleary Lake Court. It's just not ready. I mean, there's a comp plan. Everything's in place, things are moving through. I've looked at the property, I'd love to buy it. You know, if you're gonna change the comp plans. There'll be a lot of land that's available for sale, but it's not ready yet. And outdoor storage there's not a city out there that would accept it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who wishes to offer questions or comments at this time? Mr. Messenbrink, do you have any additional comments that you would like to make?
No, I'm done. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
At this point, I'd like to open it up for discussion among the members of the planning commission.
Ultimately, development is inevitable. That with respect to all parties, development is inevitable. And so then we have to look at this as a whole, as our city. How does it best work within our city? And I think Cindy, you kind of made a valid point too, with the rezoning that's required. We're talking about planning the future of this city. We're talking about excellent frontage on 21. And when we are also looking at our tax rolls and what's the best way to utilize that in order for our city to maintain the best tax flow that we can have, so that any future development doesn't land squarely on the homeowners. I think that's important too. So I think my point, and again, this is all really preliminary, you know, this is in front of us now. So in respect to the owner of that property currently, totally understand, you know, you would like to sell that property. Anybody would. And yet also with respect to the city as an entirety, it's our role to step back and say, is this is going to get developed? And I don't think that's even a question. With that in mind, what's the best way? What do we want this to look like in the future? You know, drive on Highway 65 in Blaine. You'll see where it's been kind of hodgepodged, and now development is pushing out that far, and it just, there wasn't a lot of forward planning. Can we plan for everything that's coming up? No. But can we step back to make sure that 20 years from now, it looks like we had a clue what we were doing? And so with respect to that, I do believe we have to look at our city development plan as a whole before all of a sudden we start rezoning things. We may end up being there, but until we see a plan out there, my biggest, it's a great piece of property. Yes, I agree with you, right on 21. Excellent.
Mm-hmm.
But in our comp plan, we only have a certain amount of land that we have that's site specific, whether it's light industrial or commercial or multifamily, you know, high density residential, whenever sewer and water gets out there. We've got this in front of me. We can, through the planning process, I think we can look at this, but right now it feels a little bit like the tail wagging the dog. No disrespect to anybody out there. I'm saying that I think we have to be really forward planning on this. And I think Mr. Messenbrink can surely help us with that, as well as input, which we will have public input on this. It's a big deal for our city. Now that we are a city, we are basically, this is our first shot at what are we doing with development within our comp plan? How are we going to do it? What are we looking for? And what's the best use for tax rolls? And not that we're all driven by money, but none of us like our property taxes either. And so we have to look at it in a larger concept. And I just want to make sure we don't rush the process in order to sell the land, make sure that Mr. Messenbrink gets what he needs at a proper time. If he wasn't the first one through the door, it'd be a lot easier to look because we'd already have an idea of what we're kind of developing. What are we doing in our rezoning? But the first one through the door, there's that movie says, first one through the door gets bloody. But you don't want to be held hostage either as to your plans or the Feldman's plans. But as a city, I just want to make sure when I don't use the word caution. We have to really look at this in a realistic form that there is going to be development. And that's what we became a city to have this planned on our terms instead of planned on someone else's. So I think that's where we're at right now, is to make sure it's planned out, thought out, had enough public input as to how this is laid out. But ultimately, it's a foregone conclusion that there will be changes out there. Just the way it is. Development's coming this way, but how do we do it correctly so that we don't look, I hope nobody's from Blaine, so we don't look like out there where it just wasn't well thought out. You know, the Blaine was the sticks at one time. It's not anymore. And so I just want to make sure that we think through the process, and that's where Cindy will rely on you as to how this all shakes out, and public input as to what are we looking for? What is every resident here looking for? Not that you're going to all have your say. You won't. Ultimately, you'll be able to state something, but that's what we're getting paid to do. Boy, we got to raise our wages. And then it goes to city council after us too. But this isn't, it's going to be thought out, and we're going to make sure it's done right. Something that we're all proud of. Everyone in this room is proud of. That's all I have to say right now.
Cindy, can you talk us through where we're at in the comprehensive planning cycle and what that timeline is like? Because the goal and the purpose of having those plans is to guide development. I understand, right? That process really doesn't, the next cycle of that process kicks off in, a couple of years.
So there's two different ways to change the comprehensive plan. So every 10 years, we're required, every community in the 7-county metro area on the same time schedule is required to update their comprehensive plan. So in 2015, 2025, I'm in the wrong decade. We'll be given system statements from the Met Council that tells us what they ended up putting in their regional plan, and hence what we need to make sure that we are accounting for when we do our plan. And then our next plan will be due to be adopted by 2028. That's the time frame where staff, by that I mean me and Shane, would have anticipated that we would have been taking a closer look at some areas, potentially refining some of these, some of that preliminary estimate of, along with the planning commission and the council, of course, of where different land uses could occur, because that's also when we would be doing our first sanitary sewer plan. And that's going to be a very iterative process going back and forth, of really re-looking at that vision. Some things may not change at all. Some things might change pretty drastically, but it's really one of those things that's the best time to look at that more holistic piece of the equation. Alternatively, people at any time can apply for comprehensive plan amendments on their own for, say, property that they own. And I think that's what Mr. Mesenbrink is proposing here. Sometimes those comprehensive plan amendments are relatively simple. As an example, I've had them over the years where maybe somebody's land showed a regional park in it, and they want to develop their land or sell their land, and the regional park agency isn't ready to buy their land. Well, then we're going to talk about a comprehensive plan amendment, and does that make sense to change that to something else, because they're sitting there with land that's guided something they can't even use it for, basically. So those are the types of things that tend to come up as one-off things, but also a lot of developments will come up as one-off comprehensive plan amendments. Frequently, they're a smaller adjustment. They might be, say, somebody that is doing a residential project that's right on that cutoff from low density to medium, or vice versa, right? So maybe the cutoff range is sitting right at that 3.5 units per acre area, where below it is low, above it is higher. And they, as they're developing their project and figure out their mix, they realize they need to be on one side or the other of that line. those are relatively easy comprehensive plan amendments to do because hopefully they're not impacting that density calculation. That is gonna be a risk here in Credit River because we're balancing it as low as we can right now. But in other communities, it's not, they have a little more flexibility to make those changes than we're going to have, especially if it's to the lower side. So those types of things come up fairly frequently. They're processed through a public hearing process, communication with our neighboring communities, et cetera. And there's a very spelled out process in state law for how we have to do that. So those are the two methods of doing that. This one is definitely more challenging because it has broader impacts on the community as a whole, given the types of changes that are involved.
So we've identified that County Road 21 corridor is really being one of the prime areas or the prime area for commercial development. Looking at our community as it exists now and as we forecast growth, if we lose this area for commercial, where are the other areas that that development could take place potentially?
So give me a second to pull up the comprehensive plan because I have the map of that in the packet.
And Cindy, if that comprehensive plan were to be altered due to the change of medium density, who pays for the staff's work to restructure all of that?
Great question. So if it's a development driven request, developers always put in an escrow with the city. So the processing of everything and the review ends up being taken out of that escrow. If there's additional work that's needed because of the nature of what somebody's requesting, that impacts somebody else, that would apply as well, because sometimes you can't get to from A to Z without impacting some things along the way. One example of that is some years past, I had a park and ride in a community showing up on a specific property. And developers wanted to develop it for residential. We had to find a new location for the park and ride before we would consider making their request. So so here is the build out map that's in your comprehensive plan right now. So you can see that we have the area that generally stretches from on either side of 21 from Texas Avenue down to Murphy Lake Boulevard as commercial. What we've never known is where to draw these lines between different land uses. There's definitely approximations right now, because a very challenging thing in this area is going to be a future road network, especially given existing uses in the area that may not redevelop, and specifically a bunch of residences. So that's something that we put our best approximation on here, but it is definitely something that it at some point warrants a small area plan to figure out what really can happen here. What is a reasonable road network that provides for the best connectivity that we can get to get the uses that you may want, but also has a little impact on some people that are already there as we can possibly get. So that's your commercial area right now. So if you went forward with this amendment, you would either shrink your commercial area fairly permanently, or you'd have to find some other location for it. And of course, there's a lot of areas that are already consumed by land uses that are not going to change. You have the Casey addition up here, that's not going to redevelop as commercial. As you keep going to the east, we have a number of existing residences too that are on not exactly large lots, so they're not small lots, but they're not really large either, but so not real likely that they're going to redevelop either. So you'll have to look at some of that. You do have an industrial corridor kind of specified here. You could look at whether you flip-flop those. Does that make sense? But of course, a lot of your traffic is around Texas Avenue and going to the north there. So that was one of the reasons that we had centered it in this area originally.
So hearing the concerns about connectivity and having a cut through, as one of the residents described it. Now talk us through what the philosophy is about development and road access and those kinds of things in the grand scheme.
So we do try to not have anything on cul-de-sacs that isn't of a very small nature, a few residential lots, for example. It's very challenging when you have more traffic that needs to go down a cul-de-sac and turn around, and that's its only way in and out. If there's a need for emergency vehicles to get through, you may not be able to. If there's anything blocking the road, like a couple semi trucks that, for whatever reason, didn't move out of the way. Trees that fell down, whatever happens. We do want to make sure that we have two ways in and out of the area so that we can provide fire, police protection, etc.
And having the access off the county road, talk us through what the risks and benefits would be of that and what the philosophy is.
So most. Definitely commercial businesses, but also a lot of industrial businesses will like that direct access to the county road. Rather than going through some network of other roads. And of course, their worst case scenario would be some residential roads, right? To get out to a main street. It's anticipated that the county would require various intersection improvements to be done at this proposed intersection. If something's approved here, those would all be paid for by the developer. In the way that they do their requirements as well, because this is a development driven project.
Would that apply also to 180th Street if that was the required route?
Yes, because 180th Street is not a 10-ton road. So we're again talking about vehicles that would require a 10-ton road.
Would that include turn-ins on 27?
At 180th Street. So that's something that would be up to the county when they would review a set of plans. Whether those were needed or warranted or not.
So if that road went straight through and 180th is being more utilized, would the county then a lot of times want to remove the other easements for the other couple of properties north of 185th? They change the entrance?
You mean the couple of houses up there?
Yeah,
If we were talking about residential, a residential neighborhood with residences, yes, and we have done that before. That was done in, some of you might remember in Bill Feldman's Rancho Credit River plat, there was a home that we then internalized a driveway for into that plat. This is a different scenario because it would be residences going into commercial, so I don't know what the county would do. It's certainly something they would look at the time that they're looking at a plat.
is that something typically that if they want to do that, is that the developer that would have to provide that?
Yeah, that's a
Or that's kind of up to the
tough one.
county?
It's a tough one to answer.
Because now you're off the county road, but yet
It's a very tough one to answer. And it's very specific to individual situations. Unfortunately, we'd have to see how everything would lay out, what opportunities there might be.
so the county would essentially, or could essentially trump the city.
The county trumps the city related to the
Yeah,
county road. For
yeah.
sure.
Yeah, on the county road, but as
Yeah.
far as those other accesses or accessing those other properties.
Those other properties wouldn't be party to the plat.
Okay.
So. It's ideal to try to come up with some alternative way while you're working in the area. To provide different accesses to get those driveways off of busy roads. But that doesn't necessarily mean it can be cuts to happen.
Mhm.
Other questions, other comments at this point?
I had a question related to the comp plan. So when you talk about like the 3 housing units per acre or whatever, what does like commercial / industrial, does that equal Is that a zero or?
In our case here, it's a zero. In a community where maybe you have a mixed use where you allow for commercial with, say, residences on top. Then we do have an allocation in there for how many of those would count for, that goes into the formula too. Credit River, we don't have that mixed use though. So it's not part of the averaging at all. It's just completely excluded.
So even if it was someday hooked up on the city sewer and water and all that, it's still wouldn't count for anything.
No, it doesn't.
Cindy, one of the questions that I had too was. Each land use is associated with certain tax code. And factors like that. What, if any, impact does changing something from industrial to, or commercial to industrial have in terms of potential for the city?
You know, that's a really tough question to answer. I'd have to do a little research to get you some information on mill rates and all of that, but it's also tough because there's different variables involved. There might be different valuations after development if it's one versus another in terms of how much square footage ended up being developed on there, et cetera, et cetera. So it's hard to compare without having kind of a schematic of a proposed development each way and then trying to estimate and run some numbers.
Okay. Are there any implications for taxation and revenue for the city when it comes to affecting rebalancing in density? Or is that again a tough question for us to consider?
No, I think those are disconnected.
Well. On that line, my questions or concerns go back to the community. Yes, we do know, and it's everyone's due diligence to know of development. I don't think they felt that, this would be a industrial / commercial. But with reevaluating, I know that in some evaluations as an investor myself, if you're staring at a water tower, it brings your value down. Now, if there's, in some like the comp plan, I know it's premature, but there'd have to probably be some significant buffers for noise and potential eyesores. But would that have some tax implications because of devaluing properties because of a development such? I know on the Martell property, if you look at the elevation of that's at 1,000 feet, looking down at about 980. Now, it'd be a pretty significant fence or buffer to not have to see that, and that would devalue it, and the other folks that are south of 180th, is that something that changes values and reevaluates and stuff? Because I know that's been a common question that's been brought across.
So this is a really tough one to answer. Most projects, I'll be honest, I have residents that are saying that their property values are going to be devalued, no matter what the project is next door. So I'm gonna start by saying that, and the vast majority of projects, there isn't really a devaluation that occurs. Now, could there be in this case? I can't answer that. We don't know what would go in there. And if it's rezoned to industrial, anything that's in the zoning ordinance in that industrial zoning category is something that could be developed there. And that includes something with outside storage. It's hard to answer how much of a devaluation there could be, if any. It's hard to separate that from any market appreciation that's also going on. But ultimately, tax value is going to depend on, of course, the studies that the tax assessor's office does, which is based on what is actually occurring for sales.
I think too, what makes it hard, for this is especially us as a newly formed city. And we've got this comp plan where we're looking at all the different zonings and how does it work? You know, how do we balance out our city? It'd be a lot easier as to Mr. Messenbrink when he said sewer and water, what are we, you know, who knows? The 10, 20, you know, who knows? We just know nobody has a crystal ball there. It'd be a lot easier to sit here and sort this through if we already had city sewer and water out there, right? It just makes it easier that way. But we don't. So we're here trying to look at different proposals that are going to come before us, knowing that they're bringing in their own private well, their private septic, like Mr. Messenbrink's is here too, to service many different lots. And it's hard. It's hard to make good calculated choices at this point in time with that many unknowns out there, with anybody who comes before us with this, with any kind of development plan, because we do not have sewer and water out there. As someone who lives along 21, I'm perfectly fine with sewer and water not coming out there for a while, but it does make it hard for us to look at further development and how we're going to do it, even though we must, you know, we must.
Yeah, and I think that the bigger question you need to ask first is, what do you see the city being in the future? Not today, but in
Right.
the future, and how do you want that to be? Because whatever goes in here is unlikely to redevelop.
Right.
If you approve something here, I anticipate it will stay. And so you have to just ask yourself, really the question is, do you want industrial? Is industrial an acceptable use in this area? Or would you rather keep it the commercial with some blend to medium density that you have right now in the comp plan?
Mhm.
And again, neither of those would actually be allowed right now either. All of this could take a comp plan amendment. Even if somebody came in with commercial, it's just that commercial is in that build out map. Whereas industrial isn't.
Right.
Everything right now, this land is urban expansion reserve, just like a lot of the residential property is that must sit and must wait for water and sewer to get there.
Mhm.
Yeah, so if this is taken out, if this particular parcel or group of parcels is taken out, we do need to rebalance that comprehensive plan. And we're balanced quite finely right now in order to meet Met Council's expectations, which is a tough place to be, understandable, but tough. And, you know, as I think about the factors that we need to consider, I'm hearing, you know, the vision for the city and what it needs to be. I'm hearing the complexities of trying to balance those densities in the urban expansion reserve. You know, this is going to be a challenging thing for us to consider if a proposal does come before us for, you know, because of the complicated factors that need to be taken into consideration.
I think Cindy made a great point. Then that point should guide us in our decision, which is, what do we want our city to look like? I mean, really, this is Highway 21, that cuts right through this piece of real estate that is zoned in a specific area, not that it can't be changed, right?
Mhm.
But the fact is, what do we want? As people are driving down County Road 21 and they're looking from side to side, not only now, but 20 years from now, what do we want them to see? What are we as a city? You know, if we're going to be a commercial building district and that's just what it's going to look like, well, then that's what we have to decide. But we have to make sure that we have looked at it properly and gotten enough input into that to say, what do we want to look like? What are we? There are going to be some people who want it just keep us all houses. And yet we realistically have to look at this to having a well-balanced city. How do we do that? Some things we have decisions we can make, some things are dictated to us. You know, I think everybody here has to understand the Met Council does hold some significant power when it comes to setting forth some guidelines that we need to follow, whether it's this development or any development going forward. And so it's not just us. We are also governed by the county. How are they going to deal with it? How's Met Council, who brings in the sewer, how are they dealing with it? And it's complex. but a process that we have to make sure that, I'm glad he's here. I'm glad Mr. Messenbrink brought this in front of us. Because inevitably we need to look at this. And in fairness to property owners, and in fairness, whether it's property owners like Mr. Feldman or property owners who own homes in these areas. Folks, we got to dive in and let's look at it. The kicking the can down the road is here. And now that doesn't mean it's going to happen tomorrow, nor should it. But we have to make sure that we do it right. And as much as I'm sure there's parties here that would like it to happen now, we're planning a much bigger future for this city. And so with that in mind, take the time and do it. And like you said, this meeting tonight, what we're looking at here is really, it's just a preliminary concept. What do you think? He's here saying, what do you think of our concept? Right? That's not it. We're not taking, we're not voting on something going, bam, put the shovels in the ground next week. You know, it's not that easy, but it's at least it's a concept before us to decide, push the envelope as to what are we going to look like. That's the key.
Just for clarity, there is no vote that will be taken this evening. This is all.
Yep.
Preliminary isn't even quite the right word because that is used for the next phase if someone brings an application for it. At this point, this is an opportunity for the developer who's brought us a proposal. What do you think? And you're hearing, I think, from all of us that we want to give that very careful consideration for this project. But if it comes forward, but also for what it means for the rest of the community. It's important to us. I've lived here almost 50 years. You know, I know other residents have been here even longer. So, are there any other comments or thoughts that planning commission members wish to share this evening?
I got one more thing, it's Cindy, so the ordinance on the cul-de-sac thing. Is that just for residential or is that for?
I don't have it in front of me right now, but. Yeah, we're trying to get every road to connect through. You know, unless you hit some natural barrier, right?
Yeah.
A bluff you can't cross. Type of a thing where it's natural to end in a cul-de-sac.
Because to me, I think it would be a lot easier, make a lot more sense if the road just ended and it didn't go out onto 180. If, yeah. Because yeah, there's gonna be people trying to cut across. Yeah. At least section off the neighborhood.
All right. We have one other item before us this evening, and that is the amended minutes for the orientation session that we took part in on March. Cindy, do you have the correct date in front of you at this point?
Of what that date
Yeah.
is, it's March 13th.
All right, I noticed that there was one correction on the spelling of the attorney's name. And then if I can find my sheet here, there was one other misspelling, I think. Just a typo that was inserted by mistake here. With fingers flying fast, and that was. In the fifth paragraph, it says Margaret asked how much flexibility in individual cities have. I believe it probably should read how much flexibility in an individual city has.
Okay,
It's just a run together word that
sure, yep.
that I would like to see corrected. And then the misspelling of the name is 2 paragraphs below that in paragraph 7. Sorry to be a stickler, I just wanted to see if we could correct the record there. I don't know that it would make a difference. Is there a motion to approve those minutes with those amendments?
With those corrections,
With those corrections, yes, thank you.
I'll make that I'll make that motion.
I have a motion, is there a second?
I can.
All right, I have a motion and a second. All of those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carries 4-0. All right, and with there being no other business before us, may I get a motion to adjourn tonight's planning commission meeting?
We'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
All right, Commissioner Tandy has the motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Commissioner Casey has the second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? This meeting is now adjourned. Thank you very much